Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
In the middle of a raging general election now, in the electoral equivalent of its slogovers, why should one be talking about a mere OTT movie, even if it is Imtiaz Ali's critically acclaimed Chamkila on Netflix? It's actually quite a nicely made film. The problem, however, is with its politics, or maybe with its lack of politics. And I will explain to you how and why it's important for us to talk about this, even in the middle of an election campaign, a general election campaign. The movie is set in Punjab in early 1988, when terrorists ruled, ends on 8 March 1988 with the assassination of Amar Singh Chamkila, the phenomenally popular superstar of rural Punjab, singer. We do not write movie reviews, we do not speak about movies too much, at least not as reviewers. We have people reviewing that, I don't do that. This film, however, forces us to connect with the reality we prefer to forget. And those who prefer forgetting inconvenient realities are destined, unfortunately, to live through them again. And that's what we are warning about. 3 things we take note of as we go forward. Number 1, this film is deeply and immorally flawed, as are almost all Indian films set in contemporary history, in being totally devoid of context. It has scattered mentions of ongoing terrorism in Punjab of 1988, but mostly skirts it. When I say most Indian films set in contemporary history are guilty of the same crime, there are obviously some exceptions as well. Shujit Sarkar's Madras Cafe on the Sri Lanka LTT situation is an exception, stays very close to reality, however inconvenient. But few others. This one definitely doesn't. This one skirts it. It avoids it. It's afraid to talk about the reality. Number 2, while I will elaborate on the context in subsequent paragraph, the context that I say is missing with the film, this assassination, Chamkila's assassination, took place exactly 2 months before Operation Black Thunder in the Golden Temple complex, Friday, 10th May 2024. When this column is being written, is exactly the 36th anniversary of the operation, after which terrorists, militants, radicals haven't been able to return to the most hallowed of the Sikh shrines. In fact, the final provocation for the operation was an incident the previous day on 9th of May, when Sarabjit Singh, then DIG of police, posted with the CRP, he was shot through his cheek. He fortunately survived and later rose to be DG of police. He was shot and then this operation began. This was the operation led by KPS Gill, involved Black Cat NST commandos for the first time since their formation. Also had Ajit Doval in a covert sort of a role, working alongside KPS Gill and NST commandos. In fact, enormously less bloody and enormously less controversial than the earlier operation Blue Star in 1984. Third, and most important, Canada has just arrested 3 Indian citizens, all Punjabis, most likely Sikhs, for the alleged assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a notified terrorist in India, a citizen in Canada. A concerted and somehow well-supported effort has been on in Canada, centered in Canada, but also with links mostly to the other countries in the Anglosphere to reignite the same fires and burn Punjab again. This was given further legitimacy last week with both the Prime Minister of Canada and its leader of the opposition attending a Sikh religious event where separatist and offensive slogans were shouted and incendiary pictures and posters were displayed. MEA protested about this, but those things happen routinely. I don't think at least on the evidence of what's been seen in the past 6 or 7 years, doesn't look like the Canadians care. For clarity, between 1981 and 1993, the phase of terror, Punjab had only one phase of terror. There were mini phases or phases within that phase, 13-year period, but that decade plus was the phase of terror in Punjab, 1981 to 1993, then it was over. A few of its leaders, that is, the few of the leaders of the militancy/terror, did escape to Canada and the UK, but found zero political support and mostly ultimately gravitated to Punjab. In fact, couple of them have been killed there recently by unidentified gunmen, and the Pakistanis would like to allege that Indian agencies were involved, but they find it difficult to talk about that because the counter question would be, in that case, what were they doing there? In fact, just to jog your memory, when Operation Parakram began and it looked like India was about to go to war with Pakistan over terrorism after parliament attacks, Musharraf made his famous or infamous speech in January of 2002, where he said, India has given us this list of 20-odd people, terrorists, to be returned to them. Those that are Pakistanis, obviously we can't give back, but those that are Indians, we'll see if they are found here, maybe we'll return them to India. After all, we haven't given them asylum or something. So that mea culpa, that acceptance of guilt is there on the record. So some of these militant/terrorist leaders who did go to Canada and UK at that point of time, one out to Germany also, they finally gravitated to Pakistan. Some are still there and they are on the list of India's wanted men. Today, the separatist leadership exists only or mostly in Canada, and it has the fullest political support there, unfortunately. The other difference is, unlike in the 1980s, there is no support for such a campaign in Punjab. Sikh shrines enjoy peace and calm. Nobody wants any return to the pyromania and bloodthirst of the 80s, of the decade plus between 1981 and 1993. This is a positive. The negative, however, is how strongly this purely offshore campaign has become enmeshed in the domestic vote bank politics, especially of Canada. There is protection for the vilest subversive activity under the garb of free speech. The Canadians believe that the three alleged assassins of Niger were working at the behest of the Indian agencies, although they haven't put that in their charges as yet. At the same time, what we know is these three arrived in Canada on student visas and have apparently never done a day of school or college there. That's why we say they are uncluttered, as in their minds are uncluttered, hired mafia hitmen. Further, they've also been named for 3 more murders where no Indian agency connection is alleged. Those 3, however, are connected with, again, Indian origin mafia activity in Canada. Assassinations and counter-strikes are now commonplace in Canada. Some of the well-known armed mafias in India are also operating through these groups in Canada while their leaders are lodged in jail. For example, Lawrence Bishnoi in Gujarat's Sabarmati jail. Punjab's mafias, popular culture, mostly music, drug and gun running and illegal immigration are a deadly mix, and most of its sustenance comes from lax, I'd rather not say complicit, at least not yet, Canadian system. In fact, I'll add one more name. Think about Sukhdev Singh. Sukhdev Singh was another quote-unquote immigrant from Punjab, wanted for much criminal activity, including terror-linked activity. He was assassinated in Canada. Once again, that has been described as a gangland killing, like gang warfare, one killing the other. See his pictures. Looks like a nice guy, doesn't he? It is for Canadians to ask, how come they are importing from Indian Punjab the kind of jobless flotsam like these 3 and others running mafias in their country? We know that in our Punjab, there is an extensive illegal immigration racket, popularly called kabutarbazi, literally pigeon flying. How are the visas arranged though? Is the visa/security clearance system of a G7 and Five Eyes member states so porous, callous or corrupt that so many of these students, quote unquote I said, students keep getting in? Is the need for cheap Punjabi labour so desperate, or is it the need for more voters for one particular party? Canada is importing India's mafias. That's the reality. Mostly they fight amongst themselves and keep RCMP busy, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, busy. Now this is spilling over into India. The killing of singer Sidhu Moosewala is an example. The Moosewala assassination caught India's imagination because he had become a pan-national star. Amar Singh Chamkila in 1988 was unknown in the rest of India. In fact, even in the cities of Punjab, he wasn't that well known. Or among the Punjabi urban middle class, upper middle class, he was hardly known. But in rural Punjab, he was a rage. Amar Singh Chamkila in 1988, a Dalit whose original name was Dhaniram, and he was just 28 when he was killed. He was a very local, desi, native, salt of the earth star. He was working class, his lyrics so rustic that those of us floating in the state as reporters keeping the daily count of dead weren't particularly aware of the phenomenon unless a taxi driver dropped his cassette in the player. The film suggests he was killed because somebody thought his lyrics were obscene, warned him to desist, and when he didn't, because his audiences wanted the real stuff, because whenever he went to the stage, he tried to do some religious music as well, which was also a hit, but his audiences wanted the real stuff from him and he catered to them. That is why it is explained that he was killed. As simple as that. Or for the filmmaker, as simplistic as that. That's where the context is missed. And context missed so deliberately and conveniently in a film set in a critical juncture of our recent history of our generation, in my book, isn't creative freedom. It borders on the criminal. The film doesn't suggest he was killed by militant/terrorists. It doesn't even mention the T word beyond a little smattering here and there, not substantively. His lyrics, raw as they were with much double entendre, weren't the words you'd hear in all of rural Punjab then or now. Chamkila's fame in Punjab, Jija Sali stories or Devar Bhabi or Jeth Bhabi type of stories have been part of a lot of this music. You can call it obscene. Some of it does border on the obscene, but I can find you stuff which is much, much more obscene than that and which had preceded Chamkila and still carries on. Chamkila's fame had greatly disconcerted many competitors. Who the hell is this guy from a lower caste who comes and becomes such a star? And most of his competitors were upper caste. Did somebody put out a contract on him? We still do not know. Nobody has ever been caught. Nobody has ever been punished. The safest crime in that reign of terror was murder. But even if somebody did put out a contract, some rivals did put out a contract, who is it that they will ask to carry out such a hit but a terrorist group? However, if he was killed indeed for obscenity, why was the much loved progressive poet Pash, original name Avtar Singh Sandhu, assassinated just 2 weeks after Chamkila on 23rd of May 1988? He wasn't doing anything obscene. His poetry was in fact quite romantic, quite gentle, had words of equality, a little bit of egalitarian revolution. His most famous composition, you can Google it, it was Sab to Khatarnak Hunda Hai, Sapne Ada Mar Jana, which means the most dangerous thing for you is when your dreams die. Somebody would kill him for that, you think? He was a former Naxalite, had done time in jail and had just travelled overseas to rouse the Punjabi diaspora's conscience against violence in his state. He wanted peace in his state, and because he wanted peace in his state, he was so uncomfortable to some forces at that point that he had to be put away. Overseas, he also joined a group called Anti-47. That 47, came from where? It came from AK-47 rifle, then freely supplied by the Pakistanis, which killed at least 25,000 people in Punjab in that decade plus between 1981 and 93. Most of them, a majority of them, Sikhs. So who killed Pash if not those who ruled with the 47? That is the context of that period, in fact, of those weeks. I can give you an entire list of mass killings in those weeks. There were about 500 massacred in the 2 months leading up to Chamkila's assassination and after. Here are some examples that I have listed for you, and this is by no means definitive. These are just some random examples of that period. On March 3, Karisari village, Hoshiarpur, nearly 45 were killed in a holy celebration. That was 5 days before Chamkila's assassination. On March 23, day of Pash's killing, another 9 were massacred. April 2, across Punjab, poor labourers were attacked in their huts, killing 37 at that point, including 7 children, and injuring many more, some of whom succumbed later. May 15, in Samana near Patiala, 26 killed instantly and many injured. The next day in Amritsar, Ludhiana and Jalandhar, about 50 massacred and 100 plus wounded as huts and homes of labourers were attacked. And you know what? Just as smug Bollywood filmmakers would like us to believe now that what Punjab, the Punjabis and the Sikhs especially endured in 1988 was just some bad crime, Trudeau and his Canadian administration now see the Sikh diaspora gangs in their countries who've all slipped through their immigration filters through the same lens, whereby lie multiple dangers in times to come. And every now and then I talk to you about a book I might be reading and which I find interesting and I recommend it to you. So there it is, Just a Mercenary by Duvuri Subbarao, economist, former finance secretary and also former governor of Reserve Bank of India. It's a fine book. It's a very good idea that some of our most distinguished civil servants are writing their memoirs, because at a time where so little comes out of the government, it is very important that these really smart, dedicated people put their accounts together so future generations have some reference points. Also catch his interview on The Print with TCA Sharad Raghavan.